On June 2nd, 2016, a woman named Christina Kellen posted this video of her pet parrot talking like a human.
Bro, get your over now! No! No! Shut up, later! No! No!
On most other occasions, people would look at a video like this, think it's cute or interesting, and move on with their lives, but in this case, the video of a talking parrot became the key to solving a murder, one that baffled investigators for over a year. On May 12, 2015, at around 7:30 a.m., a woman named Connie Ree heard gunshot sounds from her neighbor's house across the street in Sand Lake, Michigan, but she didn't pay much attention to it, since the neighbor, 46-year-old Marty Durham, regularly hunted in the area. Connie and her husband, Keith, were close friends with Marty and his wife, Glenn, and were familiar with the couple's habits. However, later that day, Keith notified Connie and told her that Marty wasn't answering his phone calls or text messages. So, after finishing her work, Connie went out to the Durham house to investigate. The doors were locked, and no one answered when she knocked. She assumed the couple wasn't home and went back to her house. But when an entire day passed without any word from Marty or Glenn, Connie became concerned and decided to check on them again. This time, she noticed that one of the doors was unlocked and went inside. At first, she found the living room, which was a complete mess. It looked like the place had just been robbed. However, nothing could have prepared Connie for what she came across next. As she entered the master bedroom, she saw both Marty and Glenn lying on the floor covered in blood. She immediately ran outside and called for help. A group of firefighters was already nearby and rushed to the scene. After taking note of the situation, the first responders pronounced that both Marty and Glenn were already dead. Both had bullet wounds on their bodies, and judging from the state of the rest of the house, it looked like a robbery gone wrong. But before they could begin investigating who they supposed robber was, something completely unexpected happened. About an hour after the initial report, a police officer who was on the scene noticed that Glenn looked like she was breathing. He walked up to her to check for a pulse, and that's when she opened her eyes and sat up straight. Despite having a bullet wound behind her ear, she was taken to the hospital for treatment. Miraculously, her wound wasn't lethal, resulting in her surviving. Marty, however, wasn't as fortunate. He was shot 5 different times and didn't make it. Back at their house, investigators found a Ruger new model revolver under a couch in the living room. They also found several cartridges and one unused bullet on the couple's bed. Investigators believed that this was the weapon used to shoot both Marty and Glenn, but they didn't find anything that could help them locate the supposed intruder. Without any other options, the police began investigating Marty and Glenn themselves in hopes of finding potential leads. That's when they made a chilling discovery. Glenn's phone records showed that on May 11th, 2 days before Marty's body was discovered, she texted her mother, saying, "Love you, was sorry." Seconds after sending this text, Glenn's phone accessed a web page titled Ruger New Model Single-6 Single Action Revolver. This was the same gun that was found in their home. After a more thorough search, investigators also found 3 letters written in Glenn's handwriting that were addressed to her children, similar to the text she sent to her mother. These letters also contained apologies of sorts. When Glenn finally recovered enough to talk, in October of 2016, investigators asked about everything they found. Glenn, however, completely denied ever searching anything about a revolver online and said that she had written the letters a long time ago. When asked about Marty, she claimed that she didn't remember anything relating to his death. At this point, Glenn was the #1 suspect. However, investigators didn't find any solid evidence they could use to bring her in for a proper questioning or make an arrest. It was still possible that the incident was caused by an intruder, especially since Glenn was shot as well. This left Marty's case at a standstill, and it remained that way until June of 2016, when, out of all things, a talking parrot single-handedly solved the case.
No! No! Get your building now!
Now you see, the African gray parrot in this video was named Bud, who originally belonged to Marty. He was later handed over to Marty's ex-wife, Christina, after his death. The thing about this parrot is that he was in the house when everything went down and witnessed everything, for those who don't know. African gray parrots are among the most intelligent parrot species. They're great at imitating human speech, and even understanding the meanings of some words. They're also more likely to repeat what they heard during a high-stress situation. This is why, while in the care of Christina, Bud kept repeating what he heard on that day over and over again.
Probably about a month or so after Bud got here, I would hear him scream and squawk, and it would happen a lot at nighttime. But then one day, literally, he just kept going over and over again, the same oh, and it sounded like two different voices. And I was just so freaked out that I took it upon myself to record it.
If we go back to the video of him speaking, we can make out what sounds like an argument between Glenn and Marty.
Get your building now! No! No! Shut up when you're... No!
Put simply, there was no intruder. Glenn and Marty had an argument where she was yelling and likely had a gun pointed at him. Now, while this video gave necessary insight into what went down, there was no practical way to use a parrot for testimony and convict Glenn. However, this gave investigators the confidence they needed to pursue her more intently. They took a DNA sample and later discovered matching DNA on the Ruger revolver, the supposed murder weapon. Further interrogation also revealed the whole truth of why she did what she did. Apparently, Marty had been on disability ever since getting in a car accident a few years back, but he was able to make ends meet by illegally selling his prescription narcotics. He left Glenn in charge of the money he made from his drug business so she could pay off important bills, like the house mortgage. Glenn, however, wasted much of this money on gambling and kept lying to Marty about the mortgage payments. Marty eventually learned the truth when the bank announced that it would foreclose the house on May 12th, 2015. The same day Glenn shot him to death. Rather than facing the consequences of her own mistake, Glenn decided it was better to orchestrate a robbery gone wrong and take her own life. In the end, Glenn was arrested on the 24th of June, 2016, and was later sentenced to life in prison for a crime against her own husband. On December 29th, 1986, NBC 7 San Diego aired a segment on highway safety, offering tips on what to do in case your car breaks down.
If your car should become disabled, the rule of thumb is stay inside. There are signs you can get to put on the back window to summon for help. If strangers should offer assistance, tell them to call police or the CHP.
Just stay in the vehicle, lock all the doors, turn on the emergency flashers, and wait for help to come. Even if you have to wait all night, it's better to be in the safety of your vehicle and spend the night than to try to walk and get assistance.
The segment also featured a ride-along interview with California Highway Patrol Officer Craig Pye, who emphasized the dangers of leaving your car and blindly trusting others.
Anything could happen. Being a female, you could be robbed if you're a male, all the way to where you could be killed. Once you get in that other person's car, you're at their mercy.
This broadcast concluded with an interview with a driver who ran out of gas. He had pulled over on the highway and set out on foot to find a nearby gas station.
The bottom line, though, is that preventing all this trouble is easy. Be sure your car works, and as simple as it sounds, be sure you've got gas. Because even if you're lucky enough to get some, you still may be taking your life in your own hands. Do you realize how dangerous it is?
Yes, I realize. In fact, I was putting the gas in, and a 18-wheeler came by and almost blew me away. Truthfully.
What seemed like an innocent public service announcement was, in reality, aired in response to a horrific crime that took place in San Diego just 2 days prior. The victim of this crime was Kara Knott, a 20-year-old honors student at San Diego State University. She spent Christmas Day with her family, celebrating the occasion and opening presents. After dinner, she made plans to spend the next couple of days with her boyfriend, Wayne Bautista. Wayne had severe flu at the time, and Kara Knott wanted to nurse him back to health. So she drove to his house and stayed there for the next 2 days. On the 27th of December, at around 8 p.m., she called her father, Sam, from her boyfriend's place to let him know that she was on her way home. The drive from Wayne's house should have taken about 30 minutes, but when 2 hours passed with no sign of her, her parents began to worry. At around 1 a.m., Sam suddenly got up from his chair and said to his wife, "I'm going to go find Kara." With that, he drove to Wayne's house, hoping that Kara would still be there. Unfortunately, Wayne told him that she left soon after she called Sam, and he had no idea where she was. Members of her family, and Wayne, began looking for her along the route she should have taken back home. However, despite driving around all night, they found nothing that could give them any insight into her whereabouts. Kara had vanished without a trace. That is, until 5:15 a.m., when the family decided to drive down the Mercy Road exit ramp off of I-15. There, they found Kara's white Volkswagen Beetle. The driver's side window was halfway down. The keys were still in the ignition, and all of her belongings were still in the car. But there were no signs of Kara herself. The family reported this find to the police, who quickly began searching the area. Not long after this search began, they found Kara's lifeless body, 70 feet below a nearby bridge. Later medical examination of her body revealed that she had rope burns around her neck and a mysterious round injury above one of her eyes. After a complete analysis of her injuries, the coroner concluded that she had been strangled before being thrown from the bridge. Other than these injuries, there were no signs of anything being done to Kara, which made it extremely difficult for investigators to pinpoint the killer's motive behind this horrific crime. There were no signs of someone else being in the car either, which also made it difficult to determine why she would drive off the main highway down an abandoned exit on her own. Kara's boyfriend was the last person who saw her alive. This made him the lead suspect in her murder. But he was soon cleared of any suspicion, since he was at home recovering from the flu when the crime happened. The only clue investigators had left was a receipt from a Chevron gas station, about 15 miles from the crime scene. Kara likely stopped there on her way back. Unfortunately, questioning the gas station employees failed to uncover any new leads, leaving investigators with zero clues for where to look next. Without any other options, investigators turned to the media and broadcasted Kara's disappearance in as many places as they could, asking the public for any useful information. This also included the segment on highway safety with Officer Craig Pye. Luckily, after these segments aired on TV, the Associated Hotline quickly received over 24 calls from women. However, instead of providing any information regarding Kara, these calls uncovered a far more shocking truth. They said that a patrol officer had pulled them over in the past and told them to drive down the same deserted Mercy Road exit. According to these women, this officer kept them there for hours and would even sometimes get in their passenger seats. The officer they were talking about was 36-year-old Craig Pye, the same man who was preaching on TV about how to stay safe on the highway. Craig tried to disprove these allegations with his logbook, which showed that he was writing a ticket at the time, miles away from the crime scene. However, his logbook had clear eraser marks. In that slide, 1 week after the incident, The San Diego Police Department began a formal investigation with Craig as the lead suspect, and it didn't take long for them to find mountains of evidence that proved his involvement. While searching his car, investigators found a yellow rope, which was just as thick as the marks on Kara's neck. They also found his flashlight, which matched the wound above Kara's eye. However, the piece of evidence that sealed the deal was a golden fiber. Investigators found on Kara's sweatshirt. Forensic analysis of this fiber revealed that it was identical to the gold fibers in the patch on Craig's uniform. By this point, it was clear Craig was the one responsible for this crime. However, he remained adamant that he was innocent. But all the evidence and the testimonies from over 24 women allowed investigators to piece together what might have happened that night. As the story goes, Craig saw Kara driving alone and decided to pull her over down the Mercy Road exit, just like he had done with dozens of women before. However, instead of going along with him, Kara decided to fight back and maybe even threatened to file a complaint against him. That's when he lost control and hit her with the flashlight in his hand. Upon realizing what he had done, Craig now had two choices: let Kara go and risk ruining his career, or make sure she never talks to anyone again. Craig chose the second option. After strangling her with a rope, he put her on his car's hood, drove up the bridge, and threw her off the side. On January 16th, 1987, Craig was arrested from his home and later sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He has since applied for parole twice, but was rejected both times and is still behind bars. It's still crazy to think that Kara's case might have gone unsolved if Craig hadn't agreed to do this now haunting video interview. An interview he did, just days before he had committed the murder of Kara Knott. On November 18, 2011, at 4:35 a.m., Sydney Fire and Rescue Services responded to an automated fire alarm at the Quakers Hill nursing home. The fire was nothing short of a complete tragedy. As things began to calm down, news outlets conducted interviews with people involved. One of them was Roger Dean, a nurse who was on duty at the nursing home when the fire erupted.
Hi, I'm Roger. I'm one of the nurses, and just there was a fire, and I just quickly just did what I can, get everyone out, and the smoke is just overwhelming, but you know, we got a lot of people out, so that's the main thing.
They're saying that there's still people unaccounted for. What's happening there?
I'm not sure. The deputy is she's got the list of people there, and yeah, it looks like there's still probably a few people, and the people are trying their best to get everyone out at the moment. Yeah.
By the time responders arrived at the scene, the fire had already engulfed a large portion of the building. According to later reports, the fire burned so intensely that, even with full protective gear, some firefighters struggled to get close to the flames. What made this already dire situation even worse was that the burning ward housed bedridden dementia patients who were completely unable to escape on their own. Outside, rescue workers could hear the desperate cries for help. But Chakra, powerless to act, but were powerless to act because of the extreme heat. Despite these challenges, firefighters managed to get over 100 residents to safety. Among those trying to help was Roger Dean, who rushed to secure vital medication records before firefighters stopped him from going back into the flames. But this man was hiding a disturbing secret. As it turns out, Roger Dean was the one who started the fire in the first place. It all began with him stealing prescription medication from the nursing home, by the hundreds. Just the day before the fire, security cameras caught him accessing the medication closet 36 different times during his shift to steal pills and capsules. However, his luck ran out when other staff members noticed the missing medication and reported it to the police. Roger knew it was only a matter of time before he was caught, so he came up with a horrifying plan: start a fire and steal the medication records during the chaos. While he did manage to execute the plan, the fire tragically resulted in 11 elderly residents losing their lives in the flames. After he was arrested, Roger gave one of the most bizarre excuses imaginable to explain his actions.
It was like Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
In reality, there was no Satan or demon urging him to act. Roger Dean was simply a prescription meds junkie who committed a horrendous crime in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. A later investigation even uncovered footage of him admiring his handiwork on the morning of the fire. The seemingly innocent video interview he gave now carries a chilling, far more disturbing tone. He stood trial in the Supreme Court in May 2013 and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, convicted on 11 counts of murder. May 16, 1992, Mexican singer-songwriter Chelino Sanchez stood before a roaring crowd, giving one of the most powerful performances of his life. He sang his biggest hits with passion and swagger, delivering every note with raw intensity, and the fans couldn't get enough. But what no one in that crowd knew was that they were witnessing his final performance, because the violence in Chelino's music wasn't just lyrical, it was real, and it was catching up to him. Chelino was born in 1960, in a poverty-stricken village in Sinaloa, Mexico. But worse than the poverty was the inequality. A handful of rich and violent men controlled the area. They could do whatever they wanted. And one day, one of them did. A thug named El Chapo Perez, no, not that El Chapo, assaulted Chelino's sister. Chelino was just 15 years old, but he didn't wait for justice. At a local party, he spotted Perez, walked right up to him, pulled a gun, and shot him point blank. That one act sealed his fate, because Perez had powerful connections, and now Chelino was a marked man. He fled first to Tijuana, then crossed the border into the U.S. It was there he tried to build a new life, smuggling immigrants into America with his brother, but even that didn't last. In 1984, his brother was murdered in a Tijuana hotel. The grief was crushing, and Chelino processed it the only way he knew how, by writing a song. But this wasn't your typical ballad. Chelino wrote in a traditional Mexican style known as corrido, but his lyrics were anything but traditional. He wrote about his brother's death, about their past, about drugs, smuggling, violence, real life in the shadows, and people listened. While serving time in a Tijuana prison, Chelino sang his songs for the inmates. They loved it. His gritty, fearless style resonated with Mexico's underworld, so much so that his music gained a new name, Narco Corrido. By the time he got out, Chelino Sanchez was becoming a legend. By 1991, he was a full-blown star. His concerts were packed, his records sold by the thousands. But fame didn't mean safety, because the stories he sang about, they had enemies. At one concert, in January of '92, a man rushed the stage with a gun. Instead of running, Chelino pulled his own pistol and opened fire. A shootout broke out right there on stage. The attacker was killed. 10 audience members were injured. Chelino himself was shot, but he survived. Barely. Still, he refused to back down. 5 months later, he was back on stage, this time in Culiacan, Mexico. The concert was electric, his voice strong, his presence commanding. But then, something happened. Halfway through the performance, someone walked up and handed him a folded note. We can see it clearly in the concert footage. Chelino reads the note. He freezes. His face changes. His forehead starts to sweat. Then he stares deep into the crowd, long and hard, like he knows something we don't. Eventually, he continues the performance. But it's different now. The fire's still there, but there's a heaviness too. Near the end, he takes time to thank the audience, to greet his friends, to say goodbye. It wasn't part of the act. He knew. This was it. After the concert ended, Chelino left in a car with 2 men in police uniforms. Later that night, his body was found on a dirt road. 2 bullets to the back of the head, the note he received during the show. It was a death threat, Simple and direct. They told him he wouldn't survive the night, and they were right. No one was ever arrested, no suspects ever named, just silence. Chelino Sanchez sang about violence because he lived it, and in the end, it killed him. But even now, his final performance still lives on, frozen in time, a man singing his truth, knowing it would be the last time he ever would.